Alright, let's take a look at lesson 1-3, which this is going to be integers and absolute value. Now, our vocabulary for this lesson is going to be integer. An integer is the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Typically, whenever we're talking about integers in math, we're usually talking about negative numbers. An opposite is two numbers that are an equal distance from 0 on a number line, also called the additive inverse. The additive inverse is the opposite of a number. And lastly, absolute value is the distance of a number from 0 on a number line. Alright, there's a quick reminder up here at the top of this slide. It says numbers on a number line increase in value as you move from left to right. Our first example here says, write the integers 8, -5, and 4 in order from least to greatest. Now, if we're thinking about that, we need to identify which one of these is smallest in order from, because again, it specifies from least to greatest. Okay, so we need to find the smallest. Well, whenever I'm looking at this, if we think about a number line, we want to pick the number that's farthest on the left, which in this instance, we can clearly see that -5 is the only negative number. That's the only number that is smaller than 0. Therefore, -5 has to be my smallest number. Okay. Now we're stuck with 4 and 8. Well, hopefully most of you realize that 4 is smaller than 8, and again, because it is further on the left than on the right on a number line, so our next number will be 4, and our last number would be 8. And in that instance, that's our answer. Alright, let's take a look at letter B. Letter B says, write the integers 7, -12, and 13 in order from least to greatest. Again, from least to greatest. Be sure you pay close attention to that wording, because sometimes they will flip it around. It'll be greatest to least or something like that, which will cause some of you to miss those questions. Alright, let's take a look. Again, on letter B, we only have one number that's smaller than 0, which is -12. So that has to be my smallest number. That has to be my first number. Okay, followed by, next we have a 7 and 13, obviously. We have 7, and lastly we have 13. Simple enough. Alright, good. Let's move on to the next slide. Alright, this slide says a number's absolute value is its distance from 0 on a number line. The absolute value is always positive because distance is always positive. The absolute value of -4 is written as, well, the absolute value of -4. If you notice, these two bars right here around this -4 represent the absolute value. Anytime you have a number inside those bars, it means the absolute value. Now, it says the additive inverses have the same absolute value. Alright, what this is telling us is you can't have a negative distance, meaning if we drive from Hazel to Fort Worth, we drove 20 miles. If we drive from Fort Worth to Hazel, we still drove 20 miles. We didn't drive -20 miles. We just drove 20 miles. Okay, so an absolute value is always a positive value. If you look at this example down here, it's telling us that the absolute value of -4 is equal to the absolute value of 4, which is equal to 4. Okay? And the reason why we know that, if you look up here on this number line, if we count over 1, 2, 3, 4, well, that's 4 units from 0, -4 is. If we go this way, the other way, 1, 2, 3, 4, +4 is also 4 units from 0. Therefore, the absolute value of both -4 and +4 is just 4. Examples. Alright, let's take a look up here at letter A. Letter A says the absolute value of -8 plus the absolute value of -5. Well, the first thing we need to do is rewrite that using the correct values. Well, the absolute value of -8 is just 8 plus the absolute value of -5 is 5. Well, So we're simply going to have 8 plus 5. Well, 8 plus 5 gives us a value of 13. Okay, let's take a look at letter B. Letter B is a little bit different because we have 5 minus 6 inside our absolute value symbol. Well, if we look at that, we have to do the 5 minus 6 first. Well, 5 minus 6, if we take 6 away from 5, we end up with negative 1. Now, that is still inside those absolute value signs because we haven't done anything yet. We have to do all of our operations inside the absolute value symbols before we actually get the absolute value of that number. Well, the absolute value of negative 1 is simply 1. It's that easy. All right, let's take a look at the bottom three. It says find the additive inverse for each integer. Well, additive inverses are fairly simple because it just means the opposite. Well, what is the opposite of 12? Well, the opposite of 12 is negative 12. Okay, letter B. What is the opposite of negative 1.9? Well, the opposite of negative 1.9 is positive 1.9. Okay, let's take a look at the final one, letter C here. It says 1. What's the opposite of 1? The additive inverse of 1 is simply negative 1. And that's all there is to it, ladies and gentlemen. All right, good luck.